All right, welcome to week 8, which I believe is 13 days. And I'm not sure which calendar accounts for a 13-day week, but I think if you're on Saturn in the rotation, maybe something like that works out. But no. So week 8 is, look at it. We basically cover right now till the end of the class. This is the time when you're putting together your non-discrim report. So you're going and talking to your principals, administrators, pulling data, maybe pulling some longitudinal data from the DPI website on how students have performed in your district with low SES by race and so forth. Doing your walkthrough of your buildings, things like that. But anyway. So I want to talk about some changes, and I've talked about this before in bits and pieces, but some things that I've seen change in the 12 years that I was a director, so kind of ending in 2014, but things I still see today. The position that you are going to enter, if this is indeed where you're headed, it's almost like a medical director, and you're going to have a much more high medical needs or population than you've had in the past, purely because more students are surviving, that have had complex medical trauma or early in life. So that is something to be very aware of: traumatic brain injury and other things, plus children born to addictions and things like that. But you're seeing the role of special ed pupil services director kind of almost have a slash of adding medical director. In every school, whether you know this or not, you do have a medical, you have a doctor who's assigned to kind of be to oversee like some of your policies regarding, medical. So find out who that person is. And if by some reason you don't have that, work with your local hospital and get someone that serves in that role. But anyway, so we know that poverty's been increasing, and that's that's affecting a number of districts. I mean, if you really get down to what is a wealthy district and what isn't, I mean, it's pretty ambiguous. But it's not like you can say this district is wealthy, they don't have issues, because students, of parents low SES or, drug use or whatever, I mean, it's everywhere. But we are seeing increased poverty. So making sure that we're considering innate needs, and that, like the discussion I had where the elementary students were brushing their teeth every morning. We, personal technology is out there. It's just getting unbelievable how young kids are, using cell phones and, personal devices, iPhones and droids and stuff like that. But Androids, I think a droid would be like CP3PO or whatever. But so younger and younger getting into this access to massive technology and massive information, but then also social networking and what's appropriate and what's not. And it's something that's here to stay. So again, as a pupil services director, and you're putting together your scope and sequence for what you're doing as far as, like connectedness and whatever, I would make sure that I was bringing awareness of social media and proper use of phones, cell phones and whatever, and what pictures are appropriate. I would push that way down into elementary as a starting point. Maybe even like second, third grade. So right now, I mean, most of that, I think if you look at mine, even if it's even in there, but it's mostly middle and high school. I mean, I would move it down significantly. And just that we have to realize, personal tech world, helping kids to navigate that. And while, there's many pluses to that, consider as a pupil services director, that as whatever you can do to keep balance in, again, that purpose and agency. If you can support, kids going to the school forest and kids doing any community involvement and whatever, just how important that is. And that's important for all administrators to have that thought. You know, we push personal technology, and again, I think it's a good thing. And one of the things I think it's great for is cognitive offloading. So, you know, if you're a student with a learning disability, do you really need to know the capitals of all 50 states on a test? Like, I don't think so. I mean, what you need to know is that you can go into Google and do a search and find the capitals of all 50 states. So I think there's a lot of curriculum that can start to be kind of shifted off of the plate and kind of over to this cognitive offloading area, and then bring in more realistic, like problem solving activities and teamwork and things like that, and social issues, and you know, how to civically, you know, Warren Buffett had a very interesting scenario he posed once in one of his lectures, and he said, imagine, now I'm paraphrasing this and it's probably not fully accurate, but okay, imagine, you know, there's a genie in a bottle, comes out and says, you can go back and it's the day before you were born, okay, and you can completely decide, you know, what the world is going to, you know, be like, you know, when you're born into the world, you know, you have complete control over that. So, but what you don't have control over, you know, is if you're going to be born to what type of ethnicity, you know, what culture, what continent, any of that. So, you know, think about that. How would you handle that? How would you respond to such a thing? So, some other changes, I mean, that was a little bit of a, I don't know exactly where I was going with that, but some other changes I've seen, you know, allergies are increasing. I mean, just rapidly. And, you know, parent groups are forming and becoming pretty persistent. So be educated, but also be realistic, and do not allow your district, if possible, to go down a path of banning something. I mean, you might ban peanuts in a classroom, or there might be a situation where you ban them temporarily in a building, or something like that, temporarily, you know, whatever. But do not come up with a policy that starts banning all of, you know, that, plus eggs, plus milk, plus whatever, because, you know, you're going to get in a situation where you're not, it's just going to be overwhelming. And it's not realistic. So I've seen too, the amount of, first of all, the amount of drugs that are prescribed to kids is through the roof. And drugs without counseling, so, you know, kids, here's an example. Elementary student was prescribed lithium, which used to put in 7-Up years ago, but pretty heavy hitter. So was prescribed what we found out was an adult dosage. Came to school, kind of looked gray, and collapsed. Once he got to school, collapsed in the hallway. Nurse was there, responded, did I don't know, CPR or whatever it was. I mean, and got the AED ready. We didn't have to use it. Ambulance was there right away. But the kid turned out, it was okay. Kid survived. Actually was in school the next day. We called the doctor. Doctor didn't seem that concerned about it. We wrote the doctor a letter under certified mail saying, you know, we had these concerns, and, you know, the mom had shared the dosage, and the child wasn't not given the medication at school, given the med before it came to school. We didn't have full disclosure of that, but anyway, you know, there are going to be situations like that where one of the things I felt was really important to do for us on our end was that we report it to the doctor what had happened, and then not only by phone and document that, but then we did it in a follow-up letter saying we contacted you on this date and in certified mail and had that out the next day. In case something else happened where, I mean, thankfully the kid made it to school. The kid had to walk quite a ways. I mean, but the kid, and it wasn't winter, but imagine, the kid, passes out in winter. I mean, that could be fatal. So, but it's crazy. And you want to make sure too that, medications are properly, stored as a student services, director, that is, if you've got to put some money into buying, for example, a locked cabinet, or I say like these gun type cabinets, for medications and billings, and do that. So, and of course you want to watch for any type of, educate people to any type of med selling or sharing or stuff like that. And it, I've even seen where special ed directors have gotten together and have done a collective letter, or have met with physicians, invited physicians in and said, hey, like, are you aware that this is happening? These kids are selling these things. Or also, like, a doctor cannot write an order for special ed, so sometimes that misunderstanding of parent comes in. I have an order for, my child needs a 504 plan. Okay, well, we have a process we need to go through, and or else, how homebound, works, that we're going to revisit that every 30 days, and it's not that your doctor's overriding this. But there are some times when you have to indicate, here's how the school operates, and we have to operate within these parameters for integrity. Make sure that, you have functional behavioral assessments and behavior intervention plans in place, especially like on the I-5 or the IEP if necessary. If you Google my name and behavior intervention plan, a number of years ago, maybe 5, 6, I did a presentation with two ladies on functional behavioral assessment, and then also developing behavior intervention plans. Still extremely relevant. You can find it on YouTube, but does a nice job in covering that. So again, I mean, if you're having a student that's being suspended out of school and you haven't done a functional behavioral assessment and don't have a behavior intervention plan, or if you do have it, it's not being followed, then that's a big issue. So, in your paper, I think I have a goal section for like what your goals would be to increase, to improve your practices specific to non-discrimination. Whatever you do, we will add staff, because you have really probably no control over that. That's ultimately going to come down to what your fiscal situation is and a board and the superintendent, unless you have the power to do that. But don't do that. I mean, don't say, like, we will write a grant, we will add staff. I mean, use the resources that you have and the resources that have been provided in class, because you cannot count on, a scenario like we are going to write this grant and get it, or we are going to add 3 social workers. But one of the things for student services director, so I don't know if I portray this in a bright light, dark light, medium light, how it comes out, but the job definitely changed significantly over the time that I was doing it, the 12 years. And initially when I started, it was, IEPs were pretty straightforward, and at the end of the year as a director, you had a largely narrative report. Imagine that you wrote for the DPI about, we have this number of classrooms and serve kids and whatever. And, now it's gotten to be so complex and detailed, especially with the bullying reporting and the level of investigations that need to be done per law, per Act 309 for harassment. Plus, I think, just people advocates and things like that, it's become harder in that regard. But I think the light at the end of the tunnel is No Child Left Behind was really not friendly to students with disabilities, meaning, No Child Left Behind ended up in a lot of high schools cutting consumer ec classes, tech, consumer tech classes, your traditional shop classes, because kids were being assessed on math and reading, and that's what was showing up in their report card, school report card. So that's where the resources were being put, and they were at the cost of the other programs which were very valuable for many students. So with the kind of abolishment of NCLB and this replacement, Every Student Succeeds, or I think that's the name, and that's much more allowing the state and districts to have control over curriculum, and also to some extent performance indicators. So it does take that pressure somewhat off. And if you're a pupil services director, that's a great thing, because oftentimes programs that helped students with disabilities who might learn more, through hands-on contextual, some of those programs were being eliminated, just for one, because there weren't the fiscal resources, but two, because of the testing requirements under NCLB. So I wouldn't be apprehensive about the position. I think, some advice from me is you need to have a very good peer network of other special ed directors, and be able to call and run some scenarios past. With information redacted, I would be very careful of what I communicate by email. I wouldn't probably do that, but and you'll find, people will give you feedback. They've been through these, similar situations, and you need time to reflect yourself. And there is a point, sometimes when I think you need to take a break. And I've had a number of director peers who have kind of stepped aside and taken other roles, gone back into teaching, or become a principal or something, and maybe they'll go back to being a director. But I think there's certain parts of being a director, such, it depends where you're at, but if you do a lot of work with advocates and things like that, it does eat up a lot of your time, and it typically is from a deficit perspective. It's hard to have positive aspects in that regard. You can also, though, have a tremendous amount of creative freedom as a director. For example, that scope and sequence, I developed in the allergy programs, and wow, you can do some amazing things. So I remember when we had the stimulus dollars come in, and I was designing out a wheelchair van, and actually had the blueprints in front of me of where the seats would be, and and all of that stuff. And I remember watching when the van arrived, and it was driving down the road, and we're all out by the high school, and I'm thinking, oh my goodness, I hope that I designed this thing correctly. Well, I worked with the company too, but I'm hoping this is going to be okay. And it pulls up, and it looks really nice, and they put the lift down, and one of our very severe cerebral palsy students with cerebral palsy in a wheelchair, first student to actually get a ride in the van. So they get him in and get him fastened and all that stuff, and he was just so excited. And what that van allowed us to do with our 18 to 21-year-old program, and getting kids out in community experiences and job sites and whatever, and the flexibility was amazing. But again, so as a director, I look at that and I'm like, wow, that was so cool to be able to do that. And being close to school safety, and doing actual trainings with police, where you're going through buildings with them as if there were an active shooter situation, and stuff like that, and doing participating in drills, evacuation drills and stuff like that. So hopefully you've gained things out of this class, and as you're putting your plan together, you felt like this has been helpful. the job is going to be different in every place, and that's just one of those things. And I think you bring your experience to it. Don't change a lot of things right away. Try to understand it, and I would really again encourage that CISM training for that you have that for administrators or for some key staff, because I think we do have more like sentinel events or things which are causing cumulative stress disorder in staff. And I think empowering students as with ambassador programs and things like that. So this is it. So I very much appreciate that you have watched, hopefully you've watched all of the Fireside Chats. And again, that you've received benefit from this class. I did significant updates to it for this year. And it's a unique class to teach fully online. And it's also unique because it runs Saturday to Saturday, although I've kind of adjusted for that. But most of my courses do not follow this type of format. So this one is a little bit unique. Most courses I do in modules, so they might be a semester long, and a module might be X number of weeks or whatever. But here, like, it's done week by week by week by week, and I set that up, and it seems like that works better than, because it is a short amount of time, than to try to move it into modules. But it does create where you really have to be on top of things as a student. Now, the benefit for you is, again, you didn't have to buy a book for this course. I provided everything, all the links and all of that. So as long as you were keeping up with the reading, and you're probably bookmarking some things and stuff like that, you should be in pretty good shape. And hopefully I made you aware of some things that you weren't aware of before. And just so you know, like, I'm always available as a resource. I still have people who have taken classes from me 10 years ago contact me. I had someone literally 2 days ago, while I was working on updating this class, little pop-up, hey, you got a new email, my Viterbo email. And it was a student I had a few years ago who wanted to give me an update. A student that was in student services and was implementing some programs, and just an out-of-the-blue update on some success stories of how great the year had started. I think brought in a parent liaison and started that. But it was really cool. I have a lot of resources, a lot of experience, and I am a consultant, although, like, I am not consulting anymore with districts in Wisconsin. I do mostly consulting on the West Coast. I have clients, districts, and I don't have the capacity to do anymore. But if there is something you want to talk about, run by me or something like that too, just as you are considering some professional decisions in your life. Student services are saying, Dave, I have this opportunity to go to this district and take on this position, and here's some of the things. What do you think as far as the questions I should ask, or just in general? I mean, and I'd be glad to provide whatever information I could. Of course, I'm not going to say, like, don't go to this district or stuff like that. But I mean, if you're providing specific things, I might say, go back and ask for this. And then also, one thing I did when I think every position I started as an administrator, I put together something called, like, the first 100 days of things I wanted to get done. Like getting to meet all the principals and whatever, and going through all of the buildings and doing a site survey, and going through sampling so many IEPs and whatever. But do something like that. I think that's always impressive, and I think it gives you some focus, and then you can kind of set your goals from there. And frankly, don't get discouraged if you come into something and you inherit kind of a mess. So I've been there. So just keep your head up and keep trying. And again, I will underscore the this best interest of the child. And I did that in my dissertation. And again, go back to the federal definition. When you get down to everything, it's the feds just say you need to act in the best interest of the child if you're an educator. So, I mean, really, like, that's it. Schools are left, the states are left to develop, some of the mandates on whatever, either curriculum or reporting, and schools do that, or districts do that, states do that all differently. So there isn't any state-to-state comparison that's valid. And then, in addition to that, a lot of that gets passed down. So, I mean, you got to act on your gut and your knowledge and make your decision and stand by it, and make that decision in the best interest of the child. So, always embrace, when you're offered to do things. I've stepped in a number of times and have sat in as in the superintendent role. I actually have all my licensure completed, or my stuff completed. I just don't have the license. I never applied for it because I don't want to do the PDP. I'm still one of those people under the 6 credits every 5 years, which right now suits me just fine. But, if you are provided opportunities, within your school, go ahead and do that. Get out of your comfort zone. And, one thing too is I will say personally, when I worked for the School for the Blind, I totally came in and said, I never worked with visually impaired students before. And people just say, you'll figure it out. I mean, we'll be here, and no one has. So it's not like, most of the people here haven't. And you learn, and the growth that I've experienced, getting out of my comfort zone as a professional, and then how that translates into the work that I do, probably as a national expert in threat reporting systems, has been just phenomenal. Understanding how, if you're visually impaired and totally blind, what that means and for a threat reporting system. If you can access that with voice overlay, or if something happens, how you protect yourself, or how staff, have to protect you, and things like that. But it had made me such a better professional, a better person. I learned Braille in 5 weeks, and I was taught by a completely blind student how to read and type Braille. And it was funny because I would go down the hallway, and if the student heard my voice, she would stop me and she'd say, okay, so Braille is done with 6 dots, and she'd be like .1, .3, .5, and I would have to tell her which letter it was. And she was always an instructor, which was just really cool. And it did click. And after a while, I said, "Can I just walk down the hallway with?" I said, "I'm working on this," and I had flashcards and things like that, and did pick it up and worked with a VI teacher. And again, this one high school student had kind of mentored me on some of that too. But it was really funny because you change from being administrator teacher to being in that student role, I think, which is a good thing. I mean, we need to do that more often. So kind of in wrapping up, this is a little tangential, but if you ever have the opportunity to teach adjunct for a university, go for it. I've taught for Viterbo for, I think, 13 years. I have taught for other universities. I've taught research, inclusion, special education, just a number of restorative practices, other classes. But professionally, you'll get to work with wonderful people like all of you, and you will keep your own skills sharp. That was one thing as a director, which was always great, because when I taught this class, it always made me revisit like our scope and sequence and 504 and just things that I needed to be doing. And then you get connected to a whole different group of people and whole different knowledge base and network, which I think benefits you immensely. And you also have ideas of what students are receiving in their preparatory programs. So there's just so many benefits. I have literally instructed, probably 100 classes, adjunct, for various universities. And, through face-to-face, blended online and whatever. And one class I taught, there was a student who was down in Louisiana during Hurricane Katrina, and this student had to evacuate and would move like 30 miles with her laptop and then, log in from a shelter, like a gym or something like that, and then evacuate another 10 miles and then whatever. And the strange thing was, and, would call me like on her cell phone or something like that. And I said, you can drop the class. I mean, you can, or, you can take an incomplete, there's not a problem. And she said, no, the reason I want to stay with this class is because it's my connection to normalcy, to something that's routine, that's, that makes sense, because right now my life is just so chaotic, and this makes sense. I don't want to give this up. And, to me that made sense, and she did great in the class. Actually, there was a newspaper article that was written after the fact about it, but that's, it's so rewarding to take on, this role. And to be honest, I've never had what I would say, quote unquote, a bad class. I've never got done and said, "Phew, I am so glad that class is done." It's always more kind of a little bit of a letdown, because you get to know people, and and then they exit, and then you have another group, but you just get wonderful people that you meet, like Diana Thundercloud. At one point had taken a class of mine, and that was how I met her. But if you have that opportunity to get in with the university and to do that, go for it, because you've got the skills and experience, and you're going to be able to help people. And I think for you, you'll find it very rewarding. And if it's not for you, then, you don't do it again. But for me, I love it. I absolutely love it, and I felt as a professional, it really helped me stay informed and connected and increase my knowledge base. So, all right, this is it. So week 8, we made it through, and I still have a little bit of coffee and this other 24 ounce of 48 ounces of coffee. I don't know what that means for caffeine, although it was all the way over on the black scale. So I'm assuming it was a lot. Although like the Kona, which is the one I like at Quick Trip, they were out of, which was a little disheartening. So, but I am, again, very, very fortunate that Viterbo has, again, offered this class for me to instruct. I think it's my 5th year. And it truly is humbling to work with all of you. And the work that you'll share, and as I'll read your post, you won't know it, but I mean, I'll be so impressed at the things that you'll be sharing that you're doing, and your energy, and hopefully I'll reflect that back in a number of my posts. But I'm really proud of people that take this step into administration, and just thanks for doing that, because I've got kids, and I always think I want my kids to have the best teachers and administrators as possible, and people like you and I, and that's even though there's all the political stuff and everything else, have compassion, have a good heart, work hard, work in the best interest of the child. So thank you for allowing me to be your instructor, and I look forward to your non-discrimination paper.